as people arrive.
Looky.
I love that you're doing the tapping, Mike.
Firing my awesome anchor.
Yeah. And people are joining. Hooray.
Still joining, getting connected.
Let's see. The one more is waiting there. Okie doke. Okay, Ulf.
Yeah, so hi everybody, dearly welcome to today's exciting webinar. And this exciting webinar is especially exciting for me in a way, and I hope for you, because these are two guys that I've been following for a long while, and I know that Patrick got to know them. So without further ado, just saying hi from the NLP Society, NLP-föreningen, and the NLP Society, of which we are the board and I'm the chairman. We want you to discover NLP. We want you to discover it because it's good stuff that you can use practically in your life to change things that you would like to change. And then you need to meet people who are great at this so that they can, just put their knowledge, experience, and way of seeing things into your head. Now, when you do that, a good tool is hypnosis. So again, the IHG, the International Hypnotist Guild, is a co-coordinator of this. And two of the members of the board here in the NLP Society are also members of the board of that. So much for nepotism. And also, Mike is actually uses in his anxiety course, which you should look at, he uses tapping. And you all know that I am a fan of that. So thanks for coming. Please spread the word. If you're a member of one society, become one of the other. And if you're not, become one in both. That's a double bind. Go ahead. Either way you choose, it's going to be fun today. Over to Patrick.
Okej. Lite snabbt på svenska bara. I och med att det här är på engelska, så som alltid då, är det någonting som någon önskar få en förklaring för eller en översättning på, skriv bara chatten så hjälper någon av oss andra till. Och är det en fråga som ni vill ställa, så är det bara att ställa den. Och vill ni ställa den på svenska, skriv den i chatten så fixar vi översättningen så.
Yeah, that was the legal stuff.
Okay, so this man has been a hypnotist for over 45 years. He provides forensic hypnosis for various police sources in Canada, and I believe he has done some consulting in the country below as well. He has been called a genius by psychiatrist Dr. Adam Stein. And Dr. Cindy Truman called him the next Milton Erickson, which I think quite a lot of us agrees with. And maybe most interesting for us NLP people, he had John Grinder as a personal mentor for a while. And John Grinder called him masterful. And those of you who have met John Grinder knows that he doesn't say things like that lightly. So that's fantastic, and I'm so happy that he and his business partner Chris is joining us here tonight. And just Chris is also a great hypnotist. He's also a fantastic businessman, and he is a true role model in how he continuously develops himself. And if you are a member of the Mike Mandel Hypnosis Academy, you will see that Chris often talks about business tips, how to make videos and so on. And they just keep adding good stuff to the online academy. And most of the stuff can be useful for private people as well, since it's a lot about presenting yourself and so on. But the combination of Mike and Chris is amazing, I think. So with that, thank you so much, Mike and Chris, for being here. And Mike?
Thank you, Patrick. It is a joy and a privilege to be able to speak with you today. Patrick and Chris and I have been friends for a number of years now, and I just want to acknowledge Patrick's fine work in our eminent HA, Mike Mandel Hypnosis Academy, with the ACDC official back in black shirt here. Patrick is the guy I default to whenever someone online says, where do we find that lesson about? I'm going, I don't know. Patrick jumps in right away. He knows which lesson, exactly where it is. Thank you, my friend. It's nice to be here. My NLP and hypnosis journey, I'll give you the thumbnail sketch. It's been an interesting one. It began in 1965 when I hypnotized Wayne Gibbs, who was my next door neighbor. And I was 12 years old at the time, and made his hand become cataleptic, caused glove anesthesia, and stuck pins through the flesh of his fingertips that bled profusely. But he felt no pain and was able to look at this and watch it. I ran into him a few years later, and he gave me his picture, the two of us together, for our Facebook group to verify that I have indeed been doing hypnosis for more than 55 years, or about 55 years, but 45 of which have been professional. In 1975, I was working in an office in Canada, in Toronto, and a friend of mine and I went and saw the amazing Kreskin do his mentalism hypnosis power of suggestion show. And I came home and I said to my friend who was a booking agent, I can replicate that. And he went, what? And so he booked me January 29th, 1975. I was on a program in Western Canada with a CIA agent and a number of other interesting people. And the bug bit, and I quit my office job. And hypnosis has been my life for 45 years, full time. I've lived and breathed and eaten it. And the NLP came in 1992. A friend of mine in the early 1990s, name of Ron, I helped him ace his statistics exam as pre-law, showed him how to study better, because I spent most of my life finding things that work, that are simple. And he was right into Tony Robbins. And I did not even look into it. I just wrote him off. I said, American ramp up, crazy, stupid stuff. I'm amazed you like this. And he stopped and he said, Mike, I'm surprised. You typically give people a listen. You've not even studied Robbins and you've written him off. That doesn't sound like you at all. And I went, bucket of water. I went, you're right. So I sent for Tony Robbins' Personal Power cassette tapes at that time. And I thought, this stuff is amazing. It's not like anything I've ever seen. So I began reading Personal Power, or reading the book, his Unlimited Power book, and started hearing about Bandler and Grinder and NLP. And this got me more and more interested. And I began studying, doing a practitioner training in Bandler's strain of classic NLP in about 1992 with one of my first teachers, Chris Dunkley. So I did my practitioner training. Years later in Toronto, a totally different group that was then called NLP Canada, not the one that's there now, it's a different group, under Derek Balmer, who became my mentor. Derek was a Cambridge linguist and a student of John Grinder. Derek was teaching a course in Ericksonian hypnosis. And this was an add-on. If you took his NLP training, you got the Ericksonian hypnosis training free. And my buddy, Michael C. Anthony, arguably the world's best stage hypnotist, was taking this course. And I thought, damn it, I can't let him have a certificate in hypnosis that I don't have. So I took the master course in what was actually New Code. And Derek took me aside. He said, you speak a different dialect. He said, you're coming from Bandler's strain. He said, this is Grinder's strain. And you're the same language, but a different dialect. So I did my master prac with Derek, did his Ericksonian course, and loved it. Halfway through the first day, he took me aside and said, what are you doing here? And I said, I want the certification. He said, you can have it now. He said, will you help me teach the course? I said, sure. By Thursday, he had me testing people. And then when it completed, he said, I want you to rewrite my entire hypnosis course. I said, I will, as long as I can have complete free reign. He said, you are my hypnosis hired gunfighter now. I said, I'm your guy. So I did his trainer track, which was 2 years in New Code. We would meet once a month for a full day, and we'd study Gregory Bateson and R.D. Lang and a number of others and map across New Code techniques and deconstruct. And after 2 years, just as I was completing it, Derek Balmer dropped dead. And that was October 2000. He's been dead for almost 20 years. And I learned so much from that man. I consider him one of my mentors. And we brought John Grinder to Toronto twice. And that's how I got to know him and get some extra work done with him. So what I find intriguing as the baseline here is how often we keep hearing NLP doesn't work. It's being disproven. It's a bunch of crap, which I find hilarious, because that means I've got to find at least 400 or 500 people that their phobias alone I got rid of and tell them that they aren't really cured. They just think they are because I was using something that doesn't work. And I got really in love with the New Code aspects of NLP insofar as it's not doing the typical. So I still use classic code. I still use a lot of the things there. But one of the things is, as John Grinder said, if you are using classic NLP, the original Bandler and Grinder stuff that developed, he said, how many ways can you change submodalities? It's like a lot of it becomes that, a different way of changing submodalities. And he said, with something like a new behavior generator or whatever you want to call it, with old classic code, I don't like to call it old code, that sounds disparaging, and it's not. I still use it a lot. With classic code NLP, what you're doing is you're saying to the person, think of a time you had that specific resource, confidence, whatever, which will usually be a nominalization. And they say yes, and then you say, okay, go back to that resource, feel what you felt, hear what you heard, and we put this dipper into their personal history and bring this back to the present with all the contextual junk that is connected with it and install it. But it's contaminated because it is contextual. So that's the essential difference. Whereas with new code, instead of going into personal history, we are creating a brand new high performance state now, and then grafting it into the context we are going to need it. So instead of finding a time I had something like, a sense of empowering confidence in front of a group, bringing it into the present, grafting it in, I'm creating a high performance state where I am confident in the here and now, and then connecting it to a context. So the next time I'm in front of that group speaking, I can grab the microphone, bang, the anchors fire, and instantly I'm in that high performance state. And that's why with new code, we have so much in the way of moving the body, so many shifts in that regard. Again, back to the whole thing, oh, NLP doesn't work. My question is always, well, what aspect of it? Are we talking about the meta model? The, questions that are going to get to exactly what's going on and keep us out of trance? Are we talking about the Milton model that puts people in trance? They don't work? Well, again, it's only a model. It's only when people attempt to eat the menu instead of the food that they get all over this nonsense that NLP doesn't work. I said, one of my friends is Adam Stein, who is a psychiatrist. He's just retired. He's a renegade. He was the only psychiatrist in Toronto you could see within 24 hours if you had an emergency. He was head of psychiatry at North York General Hospital, a South African man, but fascinating. He's on the autism spectrum himself. So he understands a lot of these things from the inside. And he was always defaulting to hypnotic methods and all of these other things, NLP, whatever you want to call it, the same as Erickson was, because it does work. It's a remarkable model, and as long as we keep it in the context of only being a model, it gives us a set of tools and procedures that we can use to not only transform other people, but transform our own lives. I mean, we look at something as, and I'll shut up in a minute and turn it back to you, Patrick, if you want to proceed in a specific direction. But with something like what we call the Grinder model, we have 4 levels on it that are hierarchical. And on the bottom level, we have performance. This can be our performance in any task at all, giving a speech, doing martial arts, playing a musical instrument, creating a sermon for a church. It doesn't matter. Our performance is going to be predicated by the state we are in. So all of our internal processes, what we are telling ourselves internally, our level of physical health, all of these will contribute to or remove from the positive aspects of the state. When we are in a better state, our performance automatically improves. So if we change the state, we change the performance. But above state, we now have the aspect of physiology. When we change the physiology, then our state changes and our performance will improve as well. We say that emotion follows motion. My dear friend Freddie Jacquin, who's a phenomenal hypnotist, says create an emotion and give a suggestion. And there's so much truth to that. We engage the emotions and we're able to get suggestions into the unconscious. But when we start to use motion, moving the physical body in a powerful and congruent way, our state changes automatically. I mean, when I want to be in a good state, I've got to stand, I've got to breathe. That's why I will not go to HypnoThoughts live in Las Vegas if it becomes an online training. I want to be in front of a live audience and moving because that's going to change my state, which will change my performance. And so above physiology, we change the physiology because of the mind-body connection, as Tad James puts it so well. Hypnosis is the mind-body connection. We now know how intimately they are related. There are studies done in Britain a number of years ago, decades ago, where they would have preschoolers watching a Punch and Judy puppet show. Now, Punch and Judy has been around in England for centuries. It's a very violent husband and wife who hit each other with clubs, and there's other characters come in, and it's, I'll kill you, Punch, or I'll kill you, Judy, and they have clubs and weaponry and so on. And they had a group of preschoolers watch a Punch and Judy puppet show. And in the middle of it, these nasty brownie purple things come in and start attacking Punch and Judy, the protagonists. At which point, this amorphous white glob comes in and swallows up these attackers, and now Punch and Judy are happy again. And it is said that if you see the little children watching this or listening to a story, they are going into hypnotic trance. Their blink reflex slows or becomes non-existent, the lower lip size increases, the face flushes, their breathing changes enormously. And then they check saliva swabs from these kids 10 minutes after watching. And it shows increased antibody production and probably increased macrophages, killer T cells, helper B cells. Their immune system has been positively affected by watching a puppet show. And so the physiology recognizes the fact that the mind is an intrinsic part of who we are. And I'm always surprised when I keep thinking of that British study of a few years ago, where we used to think that we, the ubiquitous we, used to believe that the unconscious mind might not actually exist. It's a construct. And now it seems like it's the conscious mind that doesn't exist, that it is a construct of the unconscious to enable us to interface mind and body with this world. We are dealing with a host of remarkable things here. And so we change the physiology. We change how we move, we change our state. We change our state, then immediately our performance improves. Even something as simple as watching a puppet show or a television program is having an effect at a psychoimmunal level. And we get to level 4 now, the top level of the Grinder model, which is breathing. When we change breathing, everything changes. I'm a martial arts instructor, so is Chris. We're both black belts. He's one of my second-degree black belts. We teach our students, our beginning students, in this uniquely British system, a British form of jiu-jitsu. I studied with the founder. We tell our students one of the mistakes beginners make is they hold their breath during a performance of a technique. When we hold our breath, we take our power away. Even boxers, they breathe into their move. When breathing changes, everything changes. This is known in Kung Fu. It's known in yoga. It's known in Qigong. It's known in rhythmic chanting that Native North Americans have done for centuries, and Aboriginals. We change the breathing. It changes the physiology, which changes the state, which changes performance, which lived in the house that Jack built. I mean, this is a wonderful way of looking at change. And this, to me, is really the heart of New Code, because so many NLP New Code shifts do involve a shift in breathing as well. When you get someone to breathe in an empowering way, we're doing something we call ADAC, which is our version of John Overdurf's meta pattern. ADAC stands for associate, dissociate, associate, collapse. And if I get someone to briefly associate into a problematic behavior or pattern, we are lighting up the neurology and the neural pathways, switching them on briefly. And since we are making new neuronal connections at the rate of at least 1 million per second on average, it makes our brains as self-patterning machines, the most complex structure in the known universe. And so when we change our breathing, and first we associate into this problematic state, then we dissociate from it. I get the student to take it, shrink it down, push it over there, pure classic NLP. You've now got a black and white, grainy picture, freeze frame of that horrible thing, whatever represents another person, an argument, whatever, and I put it nice and low so they're in a dominant position over it. And say, just leave that there. So we've done associate into it, dissociate, put some distance, and adding black and white and small, it increases the dissociation so it doesn't spill over and collapse back in. Now we have ADAC. So the second A is associate. So we want them to associate into an extremely powerful state. And we do this usually by shifting their breathing. So I have the student put their hand resting on my finger, take a deep breath, exhale, and stay relaxed as you breathe and move like this. And by changing their breathing into a slower, deeper abdominal breathing, I'm creating an artificial but powerful new high performance state that they are now associated into. And now it's C, collapse them. We collapse them together. So I say, keep breathing like this and look at that thing down there. How has it changed? Ericksonian presupposition that it has changed. And the person looks at it and they'll always say something like, oh, it's fallen apart, or I can't see it anymore, or it's gotten even smaller. As Melissa Tears, my dear friend and co-trainer, amazing trainer, says, it's impossible for it not to change, because you are now bringing new neural pathways of a resource into the lit up neural pathways of the problematic state. And by uniting them, there is a zzz, the brain makes connections with protein kinase C in an instant. And now you have brought a resource into that situation, and it can never, ever be the same again. And that to me really is the heart of new code. It fits with so many patterns. Patrick.
Awesome, plenty of good stuff there. I'm glad everyone here can watch the recording, so they can go through this in their own pace and practice the ADAC and the Grinder model, excellenskedjan in Swedish. Something that just a thought I got there, since a lot of people have trained sort of both in hypnosis and NLP. But in my experience, they tend to be either a hypnosis person or an NLP person. You are one of the few that, even if you have the hypnosis umbrella, so to speak, you actually uses NLP. You use the modeling techniques a lot. I find you take things. And I was just curious, if to someone that's either an NLP person or an hypnosis person, what can you see that if you do these little hypnosis things when you do NLP, it will enhance the effect or whatever, or vice versa? Is there something you can talk about there?
Absolutely. That's a really good point, Patrick. And thank you for bringing that up. All NLP, and when I say all, I mean most, and I don't mean 51%, I mean probably 90%, has built-in hypnosis. When one is doing something like a 6-step reframe, to the good hypnotist who is able to calibrate, and probably the number one failure among even really good hypnotists is the failure to calibrate the other person, to be in that psychodynamic loop with them. When one is in that loop, even doing something like a 6-step reframe with finger signals, idiomotor signals, we are seeing hypnotic trance developing naturally, because the person has to go inside and access these thoughts and feelings. And we're back into NLP downtime, which of course is trance. And Chris and I, our model of hypnosis, I mean, there's so many good ones. They used to believe back in Esterbrook's time in 1945 that hypnosis was really increased suggestibility, but Erickson proved it isn't. It is only the potential for increased suggestibility. It's there, but the subject is still able to say no to it. So it's not necessarily increased suggestibility. Now we know things like a neurological model are saying that the right brain awakens, the left brain becomes more quiet, more muted, including Broca's area, and now we're getting transhemispheric and interhemispheric function, where the two hemispheres are talking to each other through the corpus callosum, 200 million fibers. The brain is communicating with itself. So we have a neurological model. We have a metaphorical model, which basically sees it as a pond of still water. Everything below the surface is unconscious. Everything above it is conscious. And the hypnotic trance is a mist that forms above the surface, making the information available to the unconscious and the conscious mind. We have the magic number 7 + or - 2 model for the conscious awareness, and 3 to 20 million bits of information per second is the unconscious model. So we're back to George Miller back in the 60s, maybe 1958 if I'm not wrong. But what Chris and I look at And this is what maps it along across so nicely with NLP, is we see trance in our model as an amplifier of human experience. Anything you can do in a so-called waking state, and I'm the first to admit I haven't got any clue as to what the hell that is, but anything we can do in a waking state, we can do even better in a hypnotic state. So knowing that, any NLP process we run, whether it's a classic timeline procedure or a 6-step reframe, whatever, parts work, which is a whole other field that I'm into to a huge degree now with ego state work, but whichever NLP process we run or procedure, if we do it from within the constraints of somewhat formalized trance or incidental trance, the effects will be stronger. So we're looking at a Venn diagram here where we have NLP and we have hypnosis, and there's a massive overlap, which is far bigger than the pieces that are left out. So is it maybe just even the most powerful form of communication is another model we didn't address, but the two go together like hand in glove. And I also believe, because I've been doing different tapping procedures for 25 years, I think that also fits in very, very nicely. So if I was doing therapy with someone, if there is a lot of trauma, the Mandel model of therapy says de-traumatize first. So I'm going to work on what presents and whatever trauma is connected to their presenting situation. And one of the easiest ways for me to do that is to teach them my 6-step tapping, which you'll get 90%, 95% of what you need from that without adding all these other points. It's a little bit better than faster EFT, I believe. But when you do that and teach it to a client, we now do the ultimate because we are empowering our clients. It was Derek Balmer said, you are not only your own best therapist, you are your only therapist. And when clients realize we put the locus of control back in their hands and give them a tool like the 6-step tapping, which also fits so beautifully with NLP and hypnosis. I'm not even sure what I'm doing half the time now, Patrick. When I deal with someone online, I might be using empowering questions from NLP. I might be using anchoring, spatial anchoring, or tonal anchoring. I'll certainly be doing hypnosis because I find it almost impossible not to do it now. And I might be bringing in some tapping as well. I might be using clean language or mirroring hands. And it's whatever is required. I think for all of us as NLP trainers or practitioners or master practitioners, hypnotists, the more tools we can master for our toolbox, the better our unconscious mind will be at intentionally, beneath our surface of our awareness, grasping that tool at that moment and taking it out. It will be the right one. That's why we don't go in with a plan. Instead of a plan, we go in fully equipped. We are the special forces of therapy, and we use the right tool for the job.
Yeah, you're awesome. And I'm thinking, since you have modeled, so to speak, and brought in a lot of influence and persuasion things like the agree and repeat pattern, and you have a really, really cool way to, if you want to say something, if you want to tell off your boss or someone else with can you tell a little about how we can do that?
In fact, Patrick, it's funny you're mentioning that because that's my friend Paul, and I'm actually seeing him tonight. So we've been isolated for 10, 11 weeks here. I know he's not sick, and he knows I'm not, so I'm going to go hang out with him and drink some scotch. But Paul, in the 1980s, he had a boss, and this is a pure NLP technique. He had a boss who was an absolute jerk. And he would intimidate Paul. He was a bully. Paul's a very nice, laid-back guy. Intimidate him, go through his drawers, listen in on his phone calls, read his emails, on his case, breathing down his neck all the time, just made his life at work a living hell. And Paul said, Bill drives me crazy. He said, I wish there was some way I could get back at him. I said, I said, Paul, I'll help you with that. He said, really? I said, yes, Paul, I'm self-employed. I've got time on my hands. My parents are dead. I'm accountable to no human being. I said, therapist by day, counter therapist by night. I will teach you how to deal with Bill. I said, I'll write an intervention for you and we will meet this evening and I'll teach it to you. He said, fantastic. So I went over to his house that evening, about 6 p.m. He'd phone me in the afternoon. And I said, here's what you're going to do. I said, go into work tomorrow. I want you to go up to Bill. I want you to say everything you've always wanted to say and call him a jerk, like right to his face. He said, are you crazy? He said, he'll kill me. I said, no, he won't. He said, he'll fire me. I said, no. I said, nothing bad will happen to you, but you'll put him in a really unresourceful state that'll freak him out until his brain rewires and he fixes it a couple of hours later. This got him intrigued. I said, here's the secret. This is an NLP trick. It's called quotes. You can say anything to anybody if you are quoting someone else. And Bandler did this brilliantly. He was telling a story about Erickson to a group of psychiatrists, and Bandler did not care for the psychiatrists. And he told about Erickson staying on a turkey farm one night at a bed and breakfast, and the turkeys were all in the middle of the night, keeping him awake. So he got his wheelchair, trundled outside, opened the door to the shed where all the hundreds of turkeys were, and he yelled, "You're all a bunch of turkeys." And Bandler says that, and he points at the psychiatrist and he said, "You're all a bunch of turkeys, every one of you." And then he finishes his talk. And afterwards he said, "Did you like the talk?" And they're, "Yes, it was really good." He said, "Did you hear the part about the turkeys?" And they're going, profound, like this, right? Now, that gave me the idea. So I said to Paul, what you do is this: you go up to Bill tomorrow, you tell him everything you've always wanted to say to him, but you tell him that someone else said it to you, and point at him when you say it to anchor it with intention. And so I coached him a couple of times, and I said, the first thing you want to do, and this is missed in a lot of NLP stuff, this is gold. One of the first things you want to do is engage the state we call curiosity. Curiosity opens, according to John Grinder, opens all the sensory channels wide: visual, auditory, kinesthetic, olfactory, gustatory, whatever, digital. When we are in a state of curiosity, our brains become vacuum cleaners. Give me information. So I said, do something bizarre to get Bill's attention, to get him curious, then turn and point at him and let him have it. He said, okay. So the next day, he walks into work, but instead of being his normal friendly self, he walks in with his head down, dragging his feet. Bill says, "Paul, what's the matter?" He said, "Oh, something happened on the subway. You don't want to know." Bill's curiosity is engaged. He says, "Paul, what happened on the subway?" He said, "Oh, never mind. It's crazy. You really don't want to know." Starts walking away. Now Bill's curiosity is in overload. "Paul, come back here. You're driving me crazy. I do want to know what happened on the subway." Paul said, "Well, there was this man." Now listen to what I'm saying as I point at Bill. Paul said, "Well, there was this man on the subway. He looked really weird, like he was a mental patient or something. And when I was getting off the subway car, he pushed in front of me in the doorway, and he got right in my face like this." And Paul gets right up close to Bill, and he said, "You are an idiot. Everyone in Toronto thinks you're a lunatic." And then he just walked away like this. Why would he do that? Bill goes bright red. This integrates. He said, "I don't know why he did that. The man's obviously psychotic. There's nothing to figure out." Paul said Bill was in a bad state for like 2 hours. He said he shut a filing cabinet on the web of his thumb and was screaming. He hung up on an important client by accident. He actually managed to knock his printer off his desk, which is not easy to do. Paul said it was unbelievably entertaining until his brain made the necessary connections and put them back together. You can say anything to anyone if you're quoting somebody else. The problem with that, though, Patrick, in answer to that, is people can think you're doing it when you're not. A co-NLP trainer in Toronto really had a streak of paranoia. And I told a metaphor at the front of the class in a training. And he came over to me afterwards and he said, "Are you saying I have a problem with my marriage?" And I went, "What?" He said, "I saw you were marking things out spatially and at me. Are you saying there's a problem with my marriage?" I said, "But I don't know anything about your marriage." He goes like this, like I'm doing it again. And it's just, you got to watch it. All you people doing NLP and hypnosis, you know what it's like. People stop trusting us. They think we're doing things.
Yeah, awesome story. I hope he got a better relationship after than when with his boss.
He left.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah, and I mean, there are so many great examples. The agree and repeat pattern. I don't know how there are. Is there anyone else you would like to share with?
Well, you know, we can handle this any way you want to. I'm just looking at my notes from before when you and I spoke. Oh, yeah, yeah. Another thing from John Grinder, I think is absolutely brilliant that I wanted to share. And then maybe we can just open this up to some questions for our remaining time if you like. And I promise that if I don't know the answer, I will make it up so congruently, it will seem like I do. Just kidding. Uh, I like John Grinder's rapport method. It is freaking brilliant. When I first started learning the NLP concept of rapport, and a really good book on it is called Rapport, and it's by Michael Smith, who is, I believe, is a New York City psychologist. Good, still a good read. That was back in the early days, from the 70s to the 80s, when everyone was sort of doing rapport the same way. But you remember, we match the breathing, we tap our finger every time the person exhales, we mirror the head tilt, we offer back their language. I'm feeling very depressed, very depressed. All of these things will build a powerful psychodynamic loop. And we will enter their model of the world by doing that. And I had that happen many years ago. I had a very old printer for sale. Now, you guys are all too young to remember this, I'm sure. But it was a dot matrix printer, which was really fast. It would print nearly 2 pages an hour, like just terribly slow. Anyway, I was selling this thing to buy a Hewlett-Packard LaserJet 4. And I put an ad in the buy and sell for $100 because it was worth about $75. I thought, okay, market at 100, let the person talk me down to 75, standard negotiating trick. The man comes over the day of, long story short, he's brought with him his friend who's the computer expert who's going to decide whether or not he should buy it. Now, who do I build rapport with? The man who's paying? No. I build rapport with the decision maker, the one who's going to tell him. So I totally ignore the man who is considering buying it. And I make friends with and build rapport with the computer expert. And he's got a jacket with all these amateur radio crests on it. Peterborough, 20 megahertz, all these weird things. My dad was VE3 FBO. That was his call sign. He was ex-British Army. And I know enough about it to fake it for about a minute. That's it. I said, hey, you're into amateur radio. This guy lights up. If you're talking about your favorite subject, are you in a good mood? Oh, yeah. He goes, oh, yeah. Are you into amateur radio? We call it ham radio in Canada. I said, no. And it was a mistake. He went, oh, and I saw him deflate right away. And I said, but my father was VE3 FBO. He was into amateur radio. And I started asking him about sunspot cycles and V1 and V2, these different skips across the ionosphere. And he gets in a really good state because he's talking about his best subject, his favorite thing. So I started modeling his physiology as he talked. So he's doing this as he talks repeatedly, and I'm nodding with him. I'm doing the same thing, talking back. And now there's a lull. I've paced him and I've got rapport. And the guy who wants to buy it says, well, do I buy this thing or not? We've not even looked at the printer. And I did the guy's gesture and I said, it's a good printer at a very fair price. And the man I've got the rapport with says, it is a good printer at a very fair price. The same words, the same gesture. So I lead him. The guy pays me the full $100 instead of the 75. I remember sitting there at the bottom of the stairs, holding the money going, whoa. Now, that's classic NLP, where you're mirroring and matching and all these things. John Grinder's secret changed everything for me. He said, just pretend that the person in front of you is the most important and fascinating human being in the universe, and congruently keep pretending that they are fascinating and important to you. And your mirror neurons will do the rest. And it's true. I tested it a year later. I had a keynote, a train ride, 4 hours, 5 hours east of Toronto. I had to wait for my train afterwards. This was for Canada Border Services, which is our customs immigration. Spoke to a bunch of customs officers. I had 2.5 hours before my train came in. I was working a lot. When I work a lot, I become antisocial. I withdraw to Enneagram type 5 because I'm an 8. And I just want to read and be left alone. I'm sitting in the cafeteria in a corner and one man finds me, comes, as he's pulling his chair up, he says, mind if I sit down? I said, what am I going to say? No, you can't stay here, get away. I said, no, that's not a problem. Come join me. And I started using John Grinder's rapport secret, pretending this man was the most fascinating human being in the world that I'd ever met or ever would meet. His job was he rappelled onto Russian trawlers off the coast of British Columbia for fishing violations and contraband violations. His stories were incredible. He talked to me for 2 hours. I was like a kid listening. At the end of the talk, the 2 hours was gone in a blink. I had to get a cab and we go to the station. And he said, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me. And I said, no. I said, thank you. I said, this is one of the most fascinating conversations I've ever had in my life. And it was true. Everybody has something to offer. Sometimes they're a diamond in the rough. Everyone has something of value. When we use John Grinder's rapport secret with our clients, if we're doing hypnosis or doing NLP, even Erickson said you'll get much more with a focused intention than you will from an offhand attitude. By making that person fascinating and wonderful in our eyes, our mirror neurons do the rest. The number one thing that causes people to change is not the technique we use, it's not hypnosis, it's whether or not they like us. And if they like us, if we build a strong rapport, the effects are profound beyond belief. The other thing I wanted to mention on that regard, Patrick, I had a note to myself here. Oh yes, another useful nugget from NLP. I had lunch with John Grinder a number of years ago, probably 18 years ago now. And I had this guy to myself for a couple hours. It was just fantastic. And he said, I'll answer any question you want, but I want to ask you one. I said, okay. He said, I ask all my trainers this. He said, what are the 4 most important components of NLP? And he said, you can think about it before you answer. I thought about it and I answered. And he said, correct. I think I passed some sort of test. I'll tell you what they are according to him. The acrostic I use, or the memory jog I use, the mnemonic, is Mr. CC, MRCC. The first one is the meta model, because the meta model is never outdated. We still have the Milton model, we still have the metaphor model of clean language, but the meta model is our information gathering method par excellence, where we are not imposing our model of the world on the client. And we are not mind reading, we're not making all these meta model violations, but by asking how specifically and in what way specifically. These questions enable the client to connect all the way down into the deep structure of their language and their meaning. That will often cause a shift. So the meta model for information gathering. The second one, of course, is rapport. And it is that when we build that psychodynamic loop with someone, we have the inroad to powerful change right away. The third one is calibration. That's the first C. Because without calibration, we don't know what result we're getting. I saw a hypnosis trainer from another school working with a client, and she put this client in and out of trance 4 times and didn't notice because she was still doing her induction. And the reason she didn't notice was because she was like this, staring at her notes and staring at her script that she was reading at the person. You have to calibrate, because if you don't calibrate initially when they join you in the session, you're not going to notice if things have shifted. And if shifts go right by us, we're not being effective as agents of change. Our change should be elegant. We tap with the tiniest hammer imaginable and make the most profound shift that we possibly can. So we have meta model for information gathering. We have rapport to build that bridge. We have calibration to see what results we are getting. And Tad James does a wonderful thing there. When he's working with a client and he sees a sudden flush of integration or something happen, timeline therapy, hypnosis, whatever, he immediately says, wow, that was a big one, wasn't it? Or the equivalent in Swedish. And when you say that, what happens is it cements the change in place. It makes it condense and coalesce even stronger. So we have meta model, we have rapport, we have calibration, and the last one of the 4 points is congruence. We are congruent when our body language, our words, our tonality, our beliefs, our internal state, everything is sending one and only one consistent message. When we are congruent, people believe us. When we are congruent, the information we are giving or the directions have far more power. I mean, imagine if I came out here today and when Patrick introduced me, I said, okay, I'm really, really looking forward to this. And it's going to be, you know, a lot of really good information. You'd think this guy's an idiot. Well, I mean, you might think I'm an idiot anyway, but I promise you it will not be from lack of congruence, because I've studied with the best. I've been blessed to train with the best in the world. And I am standing on the shoulders of giants. If whatever I get wrong, it isn't from a lack of giving the source when I learn something. I think we should always give the source if we can. But we are in the best time possible for NLP and hypnosis. And there's more information available, more phenomenal teachers like John Overdurf and Freddie Jacquin and a host of others. There's great trainers out there right now. It's never been easier to learn from the best and from their mistakes. And hypnosis alone is undergoing its biggest boom since the 1880s with Bernheim and Lebo and Charcot and all the others who came out of that, and Braid and Lafontaine. Back then, it was exploding, but they hadn't discovered the real science yet. It was still laden with too much mysticism. But now, hypnosis is in a true, far beyond a renaissance. It's exploding beyond belief, and it's never been easier to learn from the very, very best. So I think it's incumbent upon all of us to never stop learning. In my keynote at Las Vegas at HypnoThoughts Live last year, I was blessed to give the keynote at the biggest hypnosis convention in the world. And one of the points I said that's crucial is just never stop learning. The day I think I've got hypnosis figured out, the day I think I'm super at NLP or whatever, that's the day my wife should put a gun to my head and pull the trigger, because at that point I've stopped learning, and that's a freaking nightmare. I don't want you to think my wife is a murderer, carries a gun. The metaphor only goes so far. Patrick.
Awesome. That was I wasn't there, but I watched the video of your keynote. I'm trying to remember if that keynote is on YouTube or is that?
It is. It is.
So
if
I
you go to,
recommend everyone to check out.
Well, thank you. I recommend it to hypnotists. Sorry to interrupt you, buddy. I recommend it to hypnotists because you can find it on YouTube. Just Google or just do a search on Mike Mandel with one L, keynote Las Vegas, and it's there. It's 30 minutes. The reason it's important to hypnotists is when I was asked to do the keynote, I thought, I do not want to do the typical thing everybody does, stand behind a podium and talk about our industry. And I didn't want to do that. I wanted to design a keynote that had never been done before. And I think it probably is the first. The entire keynote is hypnotic in and of itself. It's written in a series of embedded loops that zip up, close, and open. And then you'll get it if you watch it. I think it's a good example of embedded loops.
Yeah, it's amazing. And if anyone is having a problem finding it, just send me a message and I will help you. Okay, I think we will open up for questions. Swedes are sometimes a bit timid, but I know
they're Canadians.
But we have some excellent people here today, I know. So, well,
do you want to take them off the chat? Are the questions there, or however you want to handle it?
Let's see.
I have a question. Stig-Olof Lundin. Do you hear me?
Yep, perfect.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Yeah, okay. I'm a great believer in Freddie Jacquin, and he's very clear about he's not so fond about regression therapy. What's your point about that?
He and I overlap on this to a large degree, but I will say it with a tremendous caveat here. Anthony Jacquin and I had a conversation in Toronto last year about this very thing. And I said to him, the person isn't actually regressing. I agree with you 100%, Anthony. It's a perception. We can't put them in a time machine. And this opens an entire massive field, which is where my heart is now, which is ego state theory. Whenever we are dealing with regression, what we are doing is calling to the executive, the vaded, in the words of Gordon Emerson, meaning invaded by fear, anger, sadness, or trauma. The ego state, the subpersonality that suffered the trauma at that time. They're not actually regressing, but when an ego state is executive, they are digital. Only one can be connected to the prefrontal cortex executive function at a time. And we have ego states popping in and out constantly. We use 5 to 15 of them in our day-to-day lives. We have anywhere between 50 to 150. Some of them are functioning fully, they're normal, and others not so normal. And the best model I've seen, here's 2 quick models. One model, and this is our NLP parts, Subpersonalities, ego states, it's the same thing. It goes back to Paul Federer, who was a compatriot of Freud. It was passed on to Watkins and Watkins, husband and wife psychologists, and then Gordon Emerson out of Australia does the best work on it I've seen. And the idea is, if you look at it this way, this will answer the question about Freddie. One particular pattern is we use the metaphor of a classroom of school kids, young kids. And it's a big classroom, maybe 30, 40 kids, and there's a teacher's desk at the front. That's the authority position. The desk is empty, the teacher is out of the room. And in that room, we have all our competing ego states. Some of them have little cliques of 12 to 13 who hang out together, they're best friends. And some of them are boisterous and they want to be sitting at the desk running the class. And others are quiet. One might be standing in the corner, is frightened, and hasn't spoken in years. And some hate each other. They don't get along at all. Whichever child is sitting in that desk at that moment represents the ego state that is executive and is running the show. Now that's a pretty good model, but here's a better one. Think of a bungalow, a single-story house, but like most North American houses, or Canadian at least, there is a basement too, where the furnace is because of Canadian winters, and they usually have their recreation room down there, the TV and so on, a couch. Now, posit the existence of this bungalow with a basement. Now, on the main floor, there is only one door that leads to the outside world. On the main floor is a group of ego states, 5 to 15 of them. They hang out there all the time. They know each other, meaning they have sound neuroelectrical connections between them. These are not imaginary, they're not constructs, they're part of the physical structure of the brain. Dr. Emerson is very clear on this. So these have good connections with each other. And when somebody knocks at the door, which represents a situation in the outside world that must be dealt with, one of them answers the door. That's the one that's executive. Now, down below in the basement, we have another maybe 100 ego states that very, very seldom come up to the main floor, and even less frequently actually answer the door to the outside world. But off to the side of the basement is a bomb shelter. The bomb shelter, like the old ones in North America, to protect against nuclear attack from the Russians. And the bomb shelter, in there are the vaded ego states, invaded by fear, anger, sadness, trauma. They're stuck at a specific age. And those need to be brought out, brought to the door, executive, so they can be healed. You cannot heal them if they do not become executive. And when they're executive, you can say to your subject, how old do you feel right now? They'll say 6. You know, they'll give you a childhood age, which is when the trauma happened. Now, are they regressing? No, of course not. But what you're actually doing is accessing the wounded ego state. And this is key for anybody doing any of the tapping regimens. You know, I started with Gary Craig's EFT, and I studied with Willem Lammers, a Swiss psychologist, and we did thought field therapy. We did tapas acupressure technique, and then I studied with Larry Nims, BSEP Free Fast. And then we got into faster EFT, and now my own 6-step, which I've cemented as the one I'm probably likely to stick with. But all of us found the same thing. Sometimes it wouldn't work. No matter how much they tapped, no matter how much they made sure they were hydrated, no matter how much they changed to another room with no electrical disturbance, sometimes it didn't work. Or it worked very slowly, but sometimes it just didn't work at all. And that made no sense. And the reason why is the same reason sometimes smoking cessation doesn't work. Because the ego state that makes the appointment with someone who wants to quit smoking, the one that desperately wants to quit and is worried about its health, is the one that makes the appointment. But the one that shows up in the office is a totally different one. And unless you have the ego state executive, you can't remove the emotional charge. So Freddie and I are in agreement on this. We haven't put it in the same words, but it's not regression. All regression, indeed all therapy, is dealing with one or more specific ego states. It's the difference that makes the difference. So with your tapping work, whatever tapping paradigm you use, doesn't matter. I mean, well, it matters insofar as I was working with a multimillionaire Australian rock star who flew me from Toronto, $11,000 business class flight to clear up his issues. And it was the tapping that got me in, and I experimented and made up different algorithms. And every time I did, he'd say, oh, that didn't do anything. Then I go back to the real EFT points, which are all Chinese medicine points. Say, oh, that worked. So I began to realize that the points were important, but still sometimes it didn't work until I got the key. And the key is have the person feel the problem in their physical body. Don't say to them, how bad was it? Oh, it was about, an 8 out of 10. You're talking to a different ego state. That one's not feeling it at all. It's an intellectual ego state. Oh, it was about an 8 out of 10. Say, feel it now. Go back into the experience. And this is the NLP thing. What did you see, hear, and feel? Let's get the kinesthetic here. What do you feel in your body? Where do you feel it? By focusing them on the kinesthetic, they will now start to exhibit some of the signs of the trauma. And you're calibrating, you're looking for this. That means that ego state has now become executive. And when they do the tapping now, you can fix it. But you've got to make it executive. And that's all that regression work is doing. It is ensuring that we have brought through the model of going back in time through whatever method, the evaded ego state to the executive so it can be healed of the negative emotions. And when that happens, everything changes.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Do you know if Freddie has started to use any ego state therapy himself?
Freddie, I don't know if he does it directly. I've seen him work some brilliant stuff where he does it indirectly, very, very cleverly. He'll say, and all those parts of you that used to resist this kind of fulfillment and fun and enjoyment in your life can now hold hands together and move. And he's working with it indirectly, but he's still doing the same stuff. We've got to get to the disempowered states. And remember, ego states are popping in and out all the time. They're shifting all the time. When we remember they are digital, and only one is wired to executive at any given moment that's lit up, a stronger one can push it out. When we say something that sets somebody off, it could be, a racial slur or an insult or, that way you look at me, the person gets angry in an instant. That's a different ego state. Has become executive in that instant. And how many times, you walk into a room, it's happening to me more frequently now. I'm closer to 70, but you can walk into a room and you go, what did I just come in here for? Well, the reason we do that is the ego state that alerted us to go in that room and get something or deal with something is no longer the one that's executive when we arrive in that room. I made a huge ego state error years ago. And we have training on this. And Patrick, you were at one of our trainings in the UK. And we talk about using, let me show you guys something. Let me just grab this and bring it over.
Must be the
Sorry,
interactive
folks.
cards.
Yeah, interactive cards. I know Patrick has these. We gave him someone, we saw him in England. These are ego state cards for ego state work. What makes them powerful is you can use them for self-work. And they enable you to externalize an ego state and deal with it, much the way Fritz Perls was doing with his different chairs, which became a third of NLP anyway. And interactive cards, really worth getting. We buy them from Caversham Books in Toronto, which is the world's biggest psychological and psychiatric bookstore. But the mistake I made was I had a hypnosis show east of Toronto. Very nice environment. Back when I did 5,000 shows. I retired just over 2 years ago from the stage. I've not missed it one bit. And back then, I was doing the show, and I got off stage, and my wife's best friend, Jane, said to me, "Oh, that was really good." And I could hear the incongruence, the ... That was really good. And I said, "But?" And she said, "Well, you weren't very entertaining." And I said, "What do you mean?" She said, "You're up there, you're more like a teacher than an entertainer." Wow. I realized what had happened. I had been teaching at University of Toronto, a 5-day intensive architecture of hypnosis course. I'd gone from that to the show the next day. And my teacher ego state was the one that was executive on stage. They didn't want the teacher. They wanted the entertainer ego state. And they behaved totally differently. In fact, when I teach, I've done so much self-work. I mean, honestly, guys, I used to be not a very nice person. I've done a lot of self-work, and I'm not there yet. But my wife will say I'm better than I was a year ago, and certainly better than 5 and 10 years. We all need to keep improving and becoming integrated. But I realized by doing some self-ego state mapping, when I teach, I have my teacher state, which is the one right now. This is the one that's executive, the one that teaches and that has access to this stuff. The way it has access, even to the sometimes knowing what book and what page something was on when someone asked me, is off to the side here. I have my ego state I call the librarian. The librarian is this guy about 120 years old. And he's got a long beard and he's really wise. And he has a lantern like a hermit. And he has access to everything I know about hypnosis, NLP therapy, all these related fields. And when I'm teaching something, he will present the facts to me. Now, on the other side of me, and of course, they're not literally there, it's the metaphor. These are ego states that switch on and off, that work as a team. On this side is one that is a classic metaphor. It's an archetype. It's the jester. Jester is the joker. And all this ego state does, you know, even though I'm an Anglo-Scottish Presbyterian Christian, this ego state is like a Jewish comedian. And he sits there off to the side and waits for moments to say a hilarious line when I'm teaching. And the funny thing is, I'll be teaching and I can feel he's about to become executive and I don't know what the line is going to be. And Chris and I have talked about this a lot. And suddenly he'll become executive, deliver this hilarious line, everybody laughs, and the librarian notes the line down and files it. So I've got it for another class and my teacher ego state comes back. I mean, it's literally like that. So the key isn't whether an ego state is good or bad, it's whether it's healthy or not, whether it's conflicted with others. And this to me is the heart of all good change work, all good therapy. So Freddie and I are in agreement about regression. I'll still use it if the client wants it, but basically I'm going after the wounded ego state. It's just another way of getting to the same thing, just different techniques for the same outcome.
Awesome. Fantastic. Okay, more questions.
Chris Thompson, did you want to comment at all?
Yeah, I was thinking how to bring him in. you are on such a roll.
Sorry, I
didn't
was
want
on
to
mute
interrupt.
I've heard all this stuff a million times before.
Shut up.
Yeah, what do you want me to talk about or comment on?
I didn't really want you to say anything. I just wanted you to feel included.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you, Joker Ego State. That was brilliant.
Yeah, I love that because I can see it happening, Mike, when you used to just do this and you hadn't explained it. But as soon as you explained it to me, how you know unconsciously that there's a hilarious line coming, I'll calibrate that on your face now. Because of course we've been best friends for so long. I'll see it happening and I'll just know, okay, something brilliant is about to happen, and it gets filed away. And it's great because he used to say, Chris, that was great, write it down. Now his librarian does it.
He's taking care of it. Yeah. That's funny, man. Funny stuff.
Chris, you have a unique perspective of Mike. You have seen him from the side, so to speak, so many times, and you have seen so many participants and so on. So I'm curious, what would be something that is really, really useful for people that come to class or clients or something that you don't think is that common that people teach or that people do?
Honestly, I think the single most important thing that I've been able to observe and then more so model over the last few years is what Mike does naturally, is enter the right ego state, enter that peak performance ego state that represents what he wants to accomplish at the time. So if you see him at the front of the classroom, he's on, like, dialed up to 11. I love that expression because my Tesla has a stereo that goes up to 11, not to 10. So Elon Musk is just brilliant in all these fun little Easter eggs. And Mike is on 11 when he's teaching, and he's right there ready to be engaging, to be wise and funny and experienced. And it's the difference that makes the difference. You've all seen great speakers, right? And the best ones are just the ones that are so engaging. And I've never seen somebody turn on that level of engagement the way Mike does. And I think if you bring that to your teaching, and I think that if you bring that to your clients, of course, when doing change work, that is the most important thing. Now, Mike does teach it, and he talks about it, intention, congruence, but just listening to him say what you should do is only half the picture, maybe not even. If you watch what he does, you get the rest of the picture and start modeling it.
Thank you, Chris, for that. I think we need to keep in mind that when we are functioning at a fully unconscious level and the deeper parts of our brain are working in ways that will be not only inapparent to those around us who do not have skills of calibration, but the shifts that we make in the personalities and the people who surround us on any given day by lapsing into hypnosis just naturally and easily can help people make that kind of transformation below the surface, so that all the components of every resource they have ever had can be drawn out at that second and installed not only consciously and unconsciously, but cause a replicating effect with their lives as well as they go into it even deeper. Now, the second important thing about hypnosis is we can't stop it happening. It's happening all the time. And the third important thing about hypnosis is I'd like all of you to forget the first important thing now. That's right.
Yeah, I don't know what happened now. I don't know. Would it be possible to do some sort of group exercise or something?
Exercise, I'm not so sure of.
Or something to give everyone an experience?
Yeah, I know. You know what we'll do, Patrick? Let's teach the powerful ego state install. And I still have 20 minutes before I have to leave. So let's fill it with something useful. And any questions, any odd situations you've run into working with people, anything about hypnosis. I mean, seriously, guys, I was showing at the beginning of the session, this is my prized possession. This is an actual brick from Milton Erickson's house in Phoenix, Arizona. So when his house was demolished, one of my students got this and had it sent to me. It's signed by Elizabeth Erickson. And it's, at first I thought it was a joke. He sent it to me in a box. And then I saw it came from the Erickson Foundation in Phoenix. And then I saw there was a plaque on it. But I saw all that to say, I have lived, eaten, breathed hypnosis every day for 45 years. Anything I can share with you that is of use, I would love to do so. In fact, it's a standing joke with Chris and I say it in the keynote, which I hope you get a chance to watch, even just for the embedded loops. But my father died at age 57, very young, first sign of heart disease, fatal heart attack. My mother died at 53, cancer. And my wife's parents both died young. And I said, in my family, I'm 67. I am way, way beyond the shelf life, the best before date. And it was Chris who said a few years ago, you've got to teach all this stuff that you spent your lifetime learning before you die. So I really owe it to him for putting everything together. But one of the things I learned that is an absolute game changer, I got out of an obscure Chinese medicine book where they did some tapping. And this is the gift. Igor Ledohovsky interviewed me a number of years ago, about 2-3 years ago, for 9 hours, and then distilled it into a 5-hour presentation. We became friends just in that interview. We'd only met briefly before that, but we parted as friends and with mutual respect. And he said, give me a takeaway that I can give to my students. So this is the one. I do this every class. You might have seen me doing it beforehand if you got here early. This is a tapping method that has phenomenal results. Now, Gordon Emerson points out, you can bring a specific ego state to the executive a lot of the time with what we call a shopping list. You say, which ego state do I want executive? Well, I'm going to be presenting to a group and a lot of them are kind of, difficult people to work with. I want an assertive ego state, but I don't want it to be aggressive because aggression goes up the scale too fast. Something assertive and confident. So you make this shopping list of what you want this ego state to be. And then hopefully it's the one that's going to show up. This method will ensure it does show up. Now remember, ego states love having a job. They love having a task to do. Your job is to make sure it's one they like doing. And you get the wrong one, executive, problems happen. I said I saw Adam Van Koeverden, Canadian canoeist, single man canoe in the Olympics in Beijing. And this kid was the fastest canoeist in the world. I used to joke and say you could water ski behind this kid. And He was supposed to just blow everybody out of the water, quite literally. And when he finished this one race, he did terribly. And I'm looking at him with my wife on the news, and I'm calibrating. And he's like this, I don't know what happened. I don't know what happened. And they're saying, well, Adam, you know, you're the fastest canoeist in the world. How can you finish 5th or whatever it was? And he said this. He said, it's like I didn't even show up today. Whoa, there you go. The wrong ego state was executive, not his powerful Olympian win at any cost ego state, but maybe his ego state that likes to sit at home and play with his pet dog. The wrong one. So you've got to get the right one, executive, and this technique will show you how to do it when you need to. It's one tapping point, and you don't have to believe in it. It works anyway. It's purely mechanical, neurological, whatever. It is between, and I'll show you the thing here, between the little finger and the ring finger in the hand here, in between those two metacarpals. So you have a metacarpal running from this finger down, the 5th one. The 4th metacarpal runs down here, and there's a channel between them, and 2 fingers fits perfectly below the knuckles in that spot. So all you do is tap it firmly like this. You can do it like this. You can do it, doesn't matter. And the key is you say the empowering things you want to say, present time, as though you already have them. And what happens is your most powerful ego state that matches that becomes executive right away. And it will like being there. If it likes being there, it will stay there for a long time. So I'm going to do it standing up because I'll do it. And if you want to participate, give it a shot. And this is going to be maybe a bit difficult with the language, you know, the language mapping across, but you'll get the point. If you stay relaxed, it's way more powerful. Remember, we're back to the Grinder model. We're 3 levels up with physiology. I know you can't see my head. Then there is the top level breathing. So you're breathing fully and comfortably, staying relaxed, and you begin tapping that spot. This takes 30 to 45 seconds. As you tap it firmly, continue tapping and say something like this. I am powerful. I am in the zone. I am the God Hypnos in human form. I am amazing. I am powered beyond belief. I know everything about hypnosis. This is me at my best. I am resourceful. I know all I need to know. I am confident. And that's it. Breathe. Now, so sit back down. When we do a class, we get everybody in the class to do this at the same time for about 40 seconds. And then everyone does this. They use their non-dominant hand. In my case, it's my left. They touch the thumb to the ring finger. It's an odd anchor. So we're back in NLP now. We've gone from tapping to NLP. So I squeeze, I look at it, and I say, awesome. Perfect in English. I'm sure there's a Swedish equivalent. So I say, awesome. Hold it for a few seconds. Now I am anchoring in 3 systems. Visual, I'm looking at it intently. Auditory, I'm hearing myself say, awesome. And kinesthetic, I'm squeezing these together. That engages my awesome anchor and it stabilizes that state. Guys, I used to do Western University, which is 2.5 hours west of Toronto in London, Ontario, big, beautiful university. And I did it for 43 years in a row, 43 years of performing there. And I didn't want to drive anymore. I just got bored with it. They would send a limousine to my house in Toronto, take me to the stage. I'd do the show and they'd bring me home so I didn't even have to stay over. It was beautiful. This is how I would get in the zone for those kids. These are college, university kids. They're 18 years old. Why do they want to see some guy who's in his late 60s? They don't. And I would be in the dressing room and I would do the tapping and I'd say, I am awesome. I am the God Hypnos in human form. I am entertaining. I'm powerful. I'm fun. I'm hilarious. I'm energized. And I keep tapping as I'm saying it. And then take a deep breath and I fire the awesome anchor and bang. When I hit that stage, I'd hit the stage like AC/DC, full power, and hold the attention of, no exaggeration, the pictures in our Facebook group, over 6,000 kids, 6,000 teenagers. And you could hear a pin drop because I'm so congruent when I'm up there and so powerful, not because of me, but because the technique works. So when you're going into therapy with a client, when you're going to make a presentation, do this tapping, state everything in the positive. And if you're in a back room and you don't want to be yelling, I'm awesome, whisper it. I'm awesome, I'm feeling but whisper it as though you're shouting. This is so ridiculously powerful. This is a life changer. This is a game changer, and it's going to become mainstream. We do this every single training, get the entire group on their feet and do this. And everyone is a learning machine by the end of that. Now, here's the second part of it. I said, Chris has gone to jump in the pool by the looks of it. Chris, it's a green screen. Don't do it. So here's another thing you can do. Use that awesome anchor all the time. This is so powerful that we did that all week. Everybody, a couple of times a day as a group, they were setting up this and awesome, looking at it, hearing it, locking it in. And I say, build your awesome anchor. As an NLP practitioner or trainer, build it every chance you get. There's some music. I'm extremely auditory. It's my primary sense. I have the curse of being a synesthete. I see music. I've seen it my entire life. I thought everybody did till I was about 12. So my auditory sense is the dominant one. And sometimes music will affect me profoundly. And if it's a good effect, like some of the music of Sigur Rós I listen to and I just go, wow, puts me in the zone, or AC/DC before I go on stage, I get in that state. I feel I'm in a powerful state. I fire the awesome anchor again, stack that. I laugh at a joke. I see some comic do a hilarious routine. I'm laughing. I recognize I'm in a good state. Awesome. Lock that in as well. Keep stacking your most powerful states on your awesome anchor so they're there for you. Then when you need them, that's your shortcut. At the end of our week at Architecture of Hypnosis in Toronto, I would demonstrate ADAC, associate, dissociate, associate, collapse, with the student. We got a student to come up to the front. I said, think of something that bothers you. I'm not thinking of a screaming phobia, but something that bothered you for years. She said, a woman's name is Myra. She's in our group. She said, it's a person. I said, okay, give me a name to describe this person, whatever. She gave me a word. That codes it in the amygdala now. I said, now think of it. Think of how much you can't stand that. And I watch. Now that ego state starts to become executive, the one that hates that person, that is furious with him. And I'm seeing her tension, her chewing her lip. Now I know she's in that state. She's associated into it. So I say, dissociate from it, grab it, push it over there. So she goes, pushes it down there. I say, okay, shake it off. So there's nothing left. Now, look at that and fire your awesome anchor. So she fires her awesome anchor. Awesome. Looks at that. And that's the entire therapy. That's the entire therapy. She said, oh, it's gone. Now I'm going to do a test. You got a future pace. Try to get it back. Try as hard as you can to get it back. I can't. It's completely gone. Now, I'll get them to say it 3 times. Are you sure? Some people pretend the problem's gone. No, I'm not pretending it's gone. No, I don't know, Myra. Sometimes people, they think it's gone. No, it is gone. Now, when the person said it 3 times, they're very congruent, and you have fired their own convincer strategy almost every time. It will never come back now. Now, how quick is that therapy? You teach someone how to get in powerful states, stack them on the awesome anchor, steal other awesome states. I'm at a rock concert, AC/DC, 6th Row Center, or Black Sabbath. I'm in a great place. And I notice I'm in a great place, and I fire the awesome anchor and keep stacking these powerful, high-performance states. This will be your friend. And then when you've got to go into that meeting, or you've got to deal with a stressful personal problem, fire your awesome anchor. Eventually, it'll burn out. All anchors do. I asked Richard Bandler how long anchors last. He said they last as long as they last and not 1 second longer. But if you keep restoring them, keep making them stronger, and this is your recharge. This thing, if you say it in the present tense, say it as though you mean it, even if you don't, say it congruently, stack it on your awesome anchor. You will always have an awesome anchor with a full tank. And that's something you will have with you anytime, anywhere. And when you're in that boardroom meeting and someone starts acting up and you're getting mad, fire the awesome anchor, and you'll be very powerful and very assured, and it'll be you at your assertive, congruent, listening best.
Powerful stuff. Thank you so much, Mike. Ulf, do you have some questions or comments?
No, I'm enjoying the ride. You're in such a flow, Mike. It's a pleasure to hear it. And you know what would be fun, because you did use some of your techniques earlier when you were doing the first and second, third thing of hypnosis. It would be cool if you could explain a bit of that, because everybody was hearing going, what?
Yes, well, what I'm doing is I'm creating a series of shifting, fluctuating internal states. and I'm doing it through nominalizations and run-on sentences. So it's, I was doing Ericksonian hypnosis by accident when I was a kid. I used to get two friends of mine to fight with each other on the way home for my amusement. And it became context anchored. So they'd fight with each other. Just if we walked home that same route, it was anchored. And they'd fight and wrestle and get all mad at each other, but it was me doing it. And I didn't know. I'd inadvertently discovered some of these things like embedded commands and analog marking and so on. But that particular method is something I've been doing for years. And basically, I begin to fixate the person's attention by utilizing long sentences that create a Zeigarnik loop, which is never resolved. We have a Zeigarnik effect when a loop is left open, and the master of this is Richard Hill, the founder of Mirroring Hands with Ernest Rossi. When we have a Zeigarnik effect, we want closure. We want that box shut. We want it nailed closed. We want to leave it alone. And my wife and I would talk about this. Men need closure more than women do. It's something in our DNA. Women need it too, but men need it to a more insane degree, pathological degree. So with men, husband and wife, we have a discussion. My thought is the discussion is resolved. I've closed that box and nailed it shut. And 10 minutes later, my wife takes the nails out, opens it, starts talking about it again. It drives me crazy because that creates a Zeigarnik loop. And she would do it with things like, she'd say to me, I mean, she's a brilliant hypnotist without even knowing it. She'll say things like, do you think we should, and I go, what? And she goes, I say, do I think we should what? And she said, what are you talking about? I said, you just said to me, and I've got this Zeigarnik effect, I need closure. I said, you just said to me, do you think we should? And she goes, oh, I don't know. I said, oh, you're giving up too soon. So what I'm doing in the first part of this hypnotic loop is I'm doing stuff by creating these states that continuously mesh with each other. And by never ending the sentence, I'm permitting the brain of the listener to continually shift between the nominalizations while drawing in a sense of pseudo empowerment so that they can feel that by following what they're saying, there's going to be some sort of intrinsic meaning that will then be unpacked somewhere later down the line. And provided I continue the sentence and never put a period on it, the brain continues to follow me further and further down, at which point I say, and the second thing. Now, I have never demarked what the first thing is to begin with. So they now flow to the second thing. And I'll say hypnosis is happening all the time, even if we don't realize it. And now I'll suddenly say, and the third vitally important thing, and I pause and I'll say, is you can easily forget the first vitally important thing now. That's right. Now I can amplify it after the fact because they're doing a transderivational search. And all they're coming up with is the feelings they had, but no digital information they can lock into. And I now make it worse by saying, that's right, universal amplifier. And then I'll make it even worse and say, I think it's important for you to be certain, to remember, to forget certain things. Haven't you? And say, whoa, it just goes round again and again. It's a fun game.
That's a very elegant deconstruction. Thanks so much for both doing it and explaining it. I love that.
Oh. Well, you should look into our Nuvi. Chris, talk about Nuvi. Because this is free.
Sorry, I had to unmute myself there, Mike. Yeah, so we put together a course. What do you think, Mike? 2 years ago?
Yeah.
Doesn't matter. Anyway, it is called Nuvi. It's nominalization, unspecified verb induction. It is essentially a training exercise for crafting never-ending sentences, exactly the way Mike was just describing. We actually threw quite a lot more into it because we explained yes sets and no sets and double binds, and I think we explained some presuppositions. So it's a really good intro course. It's completely free, and the way to get it is mikemandelhypnosis.com/Nuvi-course. NUVI-course, COURSE. And yeah, anyone can claim it. It's completely free. It's an awesome course, and it gets put in your members library.
And the app is still there too, right?
Yeah, there's still an app. It still works just fine. It's, the app itself is useless if you haven't taken the course. So the app is sort of like an automatic way of generating almost like flashcards, but it's better than flashcards. The developer did a really nice job. It presents words on the screen and it suggests them to you so that you can create your never-ending sentence using those words. It basically gives you a nominalization, an unspecified verb, and a linkage, and it just keeps cycling through them. So your intention is to throw them at whatever you want. You can throw them at any random never-ending sentence, or you can pick a focus topic in advance. For example, you could pretend that you're talking to somebody about improving their study habits, and you could craft a never-ending sentence around improving study habits or
It's basically
exercise,
like
or whatever it is.
it's like boot camp for Ericksonian language patterns. And
Yeah,
when
exactly.
I started teaching this in our courses, our live courses, and hypnotists were coming up to me saying, where the hell was this 10 years ago when I needed it? I hadn't invented it yet. But Chris had the idea of turning it into an app and a little course that's free. And it's great for getting foundational Ericksonian patterns down so they become automatic. It basically enables you to install a language generator somewhere, either
there's
Wernicke's area in your brain.
There's sort of two things that we have that fit together nicely, and we haven't quite perfected exactly how to deliver this message, so this is my best attempt at it. But the Nuvi app is essentially like a formula for creating a never-ending sentence, but there's no specific language pattern involved. So we wouldn't have, a specific pattern like how slowly or and yet or when you X, then Y. So it's a structure for creating language. Separately from that, outside of any structure, we created these language pattern cards, which are also on the website, and they are just patterns. So literally you can practice them one at a time, or you can draw random cards and create a never-ending sentence that uses these specific patterns. And ideally you do both. And then what happens is you unconsciously begin to just structure language, and you throw in these patterns as you're doing never-ending sentences. So
if you could clarify something there, Chris, just want to clarify one thing, because you're sort of making it sound like it's all about never-ending sentences, but it isn't.
No.
I mean, those are Ericksonian hypnosis cards specifically.
Yes.
Yeah.
And basically what I'm saying is, in the context of a never-ending sentence, or inside of the structure of a never-ending sentence, you can use language patterns. The language patterns can be standalone, or they can be buried within this complex never-ending sentence. And if you practice both skills, they'll just fit together seamlessly. And that's the part that I think is a bit more difficult to explain.
Yeah.
Still working
Excellent.
on that.
Thanks, Chris. Patrick, my friend, we have time for one more question, if there is one, and then I should probably split.
Okay. So, anyone got one last question? Speak now or forever.
What a taciturn group.
Let me just recommend that you check out the freebies that are there in the Mike Mandel Academy, because the freebies are really, really useful and good stuff. It's high quality. It's helpful. I just told Mike before we met today that I have been sharing his stuff. In most trainings I do, whatever it is, no matter where, I share the agree and repeat video, but also the yes sets and the no sets and all those. I mean, you're explaining it really well. It's useful, and it's nice and generous of you to give it away. So I like that. Good shit.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Excellent, guys. I want to thank you all for having me as your guest today. It's a pleasure. And nice to see Chris dropping in as well with his Las Vegas background. It's probably the closest we'll get to HypnoThoughts live this year. But yeah, it's a blast. And Patrick, my friend, we always love talking to you. And thank you for putting all of this together. I appreciate it, Ulf, and it's just been amazing.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's fantastic. I know you are very busy, and people are trying to get you all the time, and we really appreciate that you're taking your time to do this for us. So thank you so much. So would you like to finish off with your classic ending?
Yes. So Chris and I would like to say to all of you at this point, thanks a lot for having us, and
good night.
Good night.